So hello, and thank you all for joining us today for a session on Calltaker Dispatcher Liability. I am Sarah Rollins from the DataMark team, and I will be moderating today's presentation from beautiful Colorado. Before we begin, I would like to let everyone know that we are recording this webinar and all attendees have been muted to ensure recording quality. So if you have a question, please use the Q&A section of this platform and we will answer your questions at the end of the presentation. I am very pleased to introduce Mark Whitby, who joins us from South Carolina as your presenter today. Mark is a public safety subject matter expert, and he brings us an absolute wealth of knowledge and experience. Mark has been involved in public safety for over 31 years in Florida and Georgia. The first 19 years, he served as a telecommunicator, CTO, communications training coordinator, communications supervisor, services division commander, and E911 director at 3 PSAPs, and he spent 2 years with a CAD vendor. The following 10 years, Mark worked for Hillsborough and Pinellas counties in Florida in the database field, working with MSAG, Annie Alley, GIS, wireline, wireless, VoIP providers, database management, and addressing. For the past 25 years, Mark has been and still is the course coordinator adjunct instructor for all communications courses with the Institute of Police Technology and Management in Jacksonville, Florida. He is also a quality assurance evaluator for Replay for police, fire, and medical calls. Prior to joining DataMark, Mark was an active member in Florida NENA as the Central Florida NENA Vice President and Chair of the Florida NENA Education Committee, as well as the Florida NENA ENP Study Group and Boot Camp. He is a certified ENP and is active in several NENA work groups and is a member of both APCO and NENA. Mark, I am really looking forward to hearing your presentation today, so please take it away.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I appreciate it. And thank you for everyone that's on the virtual conference for this session. I really appreciate it. I know this is a very difficult time for our call takers, dispatchers, supervisors, and managers having to deal with this pandemic that we're going through. But maybe I can take your mind off that for just a little bit, and we can talk about some call taker, dispatcher liability. And we're also going to touch on CTO and supervisor as well. So here's a picture of me. I'm not shooting video, because my background has a lot of Marvel stuff, so I don't know if you'd appreciate that or not. But as Sarah gave you my introduction, I worked my last agency with Pinellas County Regional 911 in Pinellas County, Florida, and I did a lot of training for them. And this topic was one of the courses that we taught for our 911 operators and our sheriff's office, as well as our Sunstar ambulance. So let's talk about liability. So what is liability? If you think about it, I'm sure we have lots of different definitions of liability, but let me give you the textbook version per se. So I'll let you kind of look at that, but I underlined a couple real key words. Obligation is one. When citizens call 911 for police, fire, or medical, we have an obligation to provide them a service. We also have a condition of being responsible for the information we ask for, the information we give to the responders, and responsible for sending the right response to the right place. And we also have a duty to perform an act. And in 911, it's usually immediate, that we take the call, we put the call in our CAD systems, we dispatch the responsible units, and then they take over the call from there and we move on to the next call. So some historical background when it comes to response mistakes. Ever since the first police department came on board and the first fire department and first EMS agencies, response mistakes have been with us. Okay, maybe it's on the road side, maybe it's on the administrative side, but a lot of times it starts with the call takers and the dispatchers. We are the first responder, so they automatically talk to us first. So when a citizen calls 911 or the 10-digit non-emergency line, an administrative line, This triggers a chain of events. So the call can fail. We may not do what we're supposed to do. We may take the right action, or we may take inaction. Maybe we decide to put in a call or not put in a call. But the community has an expectation of service. When someone calls 911, what do they expect? They expect help to come. They expect us to ask questions, even though they don't like it when we ask a lot of questions. But we need to send the right response. But community expectations are always changing and evolving. And I know you guys are going through this right now with this COVID-19. Citizens call, expect us to be able to give them answers, and we may not have those answers right off the bat. But citizens get their expectations from TV, social media, or regular media, from family and friends. Okay? But they expect the same level of service in their own communities. So if I'm in one community and I call 911 for some reason, maybe it's a car accident I saw, and I go to a different location and I call 911, I kind of should expect the same level of service. One of my favorite things about TV is shows like NCIS. McGee is amazing. If you give McGee a cell phone number, he can tell you exactly in seconds where that caller is and if the phone is on or off. So citizens think that we can do the same thing. Well, we can't. And then, of course, they think if they call, someone broke in my car, somebody's going to take fingerprints, we're going to get DNA, and we're going to catch a suspect within an hour and take them to court, just like Law and Order. That doesn't happen. That's on TV. That's in the movies, those kind of things. Okay? But if we don't meet the community expectation, if we don't meet their level of expectation, could we be sued? Yes, litigation could happen. So what kind of things could go wrong? Well, first and foremost, we put in a wrong address. So maybe we transpose.
Mark, I'm going to interrupt you for just a moment. Your sound is very garbled.
It is, okay.
Yes, the audio keeps breaking up. I'm not sure what you have on your end if you're going through your computer versus your phone.
Yeah, I'm going through my phone, but let me try something else.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks.
You bet.
Okay, so wrong address is the first thing. We transpose house numbers. We put in street instead of drive. Or we put in the correct street.
Mark, I'm so sorry. It's still garbled and breaking up.
All right, hold on a second.
Okay.
See if I can.
Look at it. Thank you all for your patience. We are still here. We are just resolving our audio challenges. I can see Mark connecting back to the audio here. Mark, you're on mute if you're back on.
Okay, how's that?
Oh my goodness, so much better.
All right, let's do that. Okay.
Thank
So
you.
sorry about that, everybody. So wrong address, like we talked about, even though you probably couldn't hear me well, we transpose house numbers, we put in street instead of drive. Maybe we have two addresses that are on the same street in two different communities, so we don't get the correct city. Call taker or dispatcher does not believe the call's an emergency. Well, number one, it's not our job to judge the caller. They call, to them it's an emergency. We put the call in the system. We don't downgrade it, we don't upgrade it based on their emotional status. It's based on the information, we put the call in. Sometimes we'll prioritize the call incorrectly. So instead of it being a higher priority call, like a call with weapons being a priority 1 or 2 maybe, we downgrade it to a 3 or 4, where the response can take a little bit longer. Sometimes we have incorrect, or we don't even give pre-arrival instructions. Well, if you start giving CPR and you just decide to stop for no reason, that's not a good thing. We need to make sure we keep giving CPR instructions until responders arrive. Another thing is not following policies and procedures. We have policy and procedures for a reason. Years and years of trial and error to get things the way they work so efficiently and effectively. But when you think of what could go wrong, what else do you think can go wrong? There's a lot of different things that can happen. We can delay a response by not dispatching a unit right away. We don't send the right amount of response. So maybe we have a structure fire and we don't send the right first alarm response. Or we don't ask the right questions, so we're not following our protocols. So again, the paramedics grabbed the wrong equipment out of their vehicle when they really needed something else. So let's talk about some examples of things that can go wrong. So some of you may have been around 911 and working in your PSAP in 1994. In Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the city of brotherly love, there was multiple 911 calls placed to Philadelphia Police Department because of a group of subjects started about 10, 15 people, got all the way up to 40. So almost like a mob type mentality. They were going up the street. They had stopped at a car dealership, were smashing windows with baseball bats, causing a disturbance in a fast food restaurant parking lot. And they ran into Eddie Pollock and a girl that he was with. Well, they ended up beating Eddie Pollock to death with baseball bats, kicking him and all these things. The girl ran to a church, like the picture shows, and she called 911 from a payphone. She didn't know the address, but she knew the name of the church because it was marked on the church. The call taker didn't know where this church was. Philadelphia is a pretty big city. But in 1994, we didn't have things like Google or the internet. So what could she have used in 1994 to find an address? Well, there's something called a phone book or Yellow Pages. She could have looked up the address and sent responders to where this happened. But they had gotten multiple 911 calls, but the call takers downgraded the call to a title of disturbance on a highway. It ended up taking a while to find Eddie, and by the time they found him, he had already passed away. So there was a big lawsuit. The family sued Philadelphia and won millions of dollars in the lawsuit. But instead of them keeping that money, they gave it back to the 911 center and said, we want you to use this for training of the 911 operators, because it was determined during the investigation they only had 2 weeks of training to be a 911 operator in 1994, which we know, even in 94, 2 weeks is not enough, especially for a city that big. In December of 2014, so 20 years later, in Alpharetta, Georgia, Chanel Anderson was delivering papers at 4 in the morning and missed her turn and drove into a pond, and she called 911 while she was in her vehicle. She gave them the location of the Fairway Road at Batesville. The operator was unable to get that into the system to dispatch units. So knowing your jurisdiction is an important thing as well. And especially if they give you an address, some CAD systems will allow you to force an intersection or an address into the system, so at least a response can be started. And in 2014, we had maps and dispatch. We had internet. So maybe this person could have used Google or other type of map resources to kind of help narrow down the location, so at least they could have gotten out there. In April of 2019, 5 years later, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a caller called. There was an assault. His friend was beat up. The caller gave the address of 3356 12th Street. The call taker made an error and put in 10th Street, same house number, but 2 streets away. Police were sent to the wrong address. So that's why nowadays, especially verifying addresses, making the caller call it, repeat it back. If we have to repeat it back to them or say, did you say 10th or 12th? Making sure that you understand exactly where help is coming to. And then just a few months ago in Montgomery County, Maryland, there was a house fire. The call taker misunderstood the address, fire went to the wrong location and the house burned down. The address was 2005 Pickard Road in Wheaton. The call taker put in 2005's Pickard Drive, which is in an entirely different city of Rockville. So again, verifying locations are huge. And if we start off the call bad, it's probably going to go bad. So we have to really make sure our call takers really understand the addresses, making sure they have the right address. And when I was a trainer for Largo Police Department, I always made sure I told my trainees and all the employees I worked with, if you take a call, would you be able to physically get into a car and drive to that location based on the information you have in your CAD? So the right city, the right cross streets, the right grids, those kind of things. But when it comes to liability, 2 things are certain. If we make a mistake, somebody could get hurt. And if someone gets hurt, somebody's going to get sued by a mistake that a call taker, dispatcher, or even a responder made for a type of event. So when you hear about liability, you also think about negligence. Negligence doesn't just apply to us taking calls and dispatching units. It also has to do with our hiring practices, our training, and our personnel. And here's a definition of negligence, but the key words are reasonable and prudent. So if we fail to do something that common sense would prevail and you would do or not do, that's where negligence really is involved. And negligence also means failure to correct a wrong. So if you're a CTO or a supervisor, if you see your trainee or an employee doing something incorrectly, you are responsible to correct them so they don't make that same mistake again. If you don't, you could be negligent in doing your job and your responsibilities. So there are 4 elements of neglect. So there's duty, breach of duty, causation, and damages. So we're going to talk about each one of these. Duty is a general duty of care that is imposed on all human activities. And then there's a second definition there, but the key words are standard of care. What is the standard of care that we provide to a citizen who calls 911 or our administrative lines, fire or EMS services? Well, we have standard of care. Some people use ABCO protocols, some people use priority dispatch protocols, some agencies use PowerPhone, some agencies write their own policies, procedures, and protocols on things that we ask, things that we do in a certain time frame in a certain order. So breach of duty is if we don't do what we're supposed to do. So there's 3 different types. So there's misfeasance, malfeasance, and nonfeasance. The one that affects us probably the most is nonfeasance, the failure to perform an act of duty that is otherwise required. Citizen calls 911, starts that chain of events, where we should put in a call for service. The dispatcher dispatches the appropriate responses, could be police, fire, medical. They go and they help that person. So if we don't do it, we are breaching the duty that we have as public safety personnel. Under causation, there's two actual types. There's actual and there's proximate. So actual means cause in fact. So an easy way to do this is the but-for test, as they say. Miss Jones would not have died from her stab wounds but for the dispatcher's 10-minute delay in dispatching assistance. So if we could have gotten there in 3 minutes, in 5 minutes, Ms. Jones would still be with us. Mr. Smith would not be permanently disabled as a result of his blocked airway, but for the call taker's failure to give pre-arrival instructions. If you are EMD certified or EMD trained or have gone through CPR, AED classes, and your agency has a policy that we use, it's our responsibility to provide these each and every time we need to. We don't pick and choose who we do it for. Ms. Williams would not have been arrested, but for the dispatcher advised the officer that she had an active warrant and suspended license. Well, this could have been an identity theft kind of situation, or maybe the dispatcher quickly looked and saw the name matched, but the date of birth didn't match. Or maybe the address was different on the license, but didn't take the time to kind of match it up. So we arrested this person where we didn't need to. And then proximate causation is the legal cause, which is based on foreseeability. Well, in dispatch, we can't really foresee the future. We are relying on what the caller is providing us when we ask questions. Okay, we can't predict, and we're not required to predict what will happen. We put the information in the CAD, dispatcher dispatches the call, law enforcement decides if they arrest someone. Fire decides, okay, yeah, we're putting out this fire, you can't stay here tonight because of smoke inhalation. EMS decides, do they transport or not? So we only have a piece of this, but we can't foresee what's going to happen or know ahead of time what's going to happen. Damages. When people go to court, a lot of times if you watch any of those crime shows that talk about court systems and those kind of things, it simply refers to any actual harm or injury. So basically they award damages to the plaintiff to get them as closely back to their original condition before the negligent act occurred. Damages are determined by the court, and usually it's a dollar amount, it's monetary. Okay, we're not usually involved with that. That's what judges and juries do. But when you think about the cost of neglect or negligence, there's compensatory damages, punitive damages. Those are assigned by the jury in the court. Both sides have attorneys. There's trial cost. There's an emotional cost for all the people involved. And there's always what they call the court of public opinion. Because once the media gets hold of it, that can cause a lot more damage, because maybe that will affect your agency as a whole, maybe just your communication center. It could be in the news, and nowadays it's not just local news, it blows up and goes nationwide or even worldwide, depending on what happens. But what other cost of negligence could there be? Well, I think about it as from a training perspective sometimes. And if I have someone who has failed out of the CTO program and didn't pass, how much money did that cost me to hire this new employee, to get them trained, to get them certified in different things like EMD, EFD, EPD, maybe a state certification, sending them to other classes, paying for their uniforms, all that stuff costs money. What if I have someone who's a problem employee who I fire because they've caused us all kind of headaches and they've never done their job very well? Now I'm short-staffed. So if I'm short-staffed, I'm gonna have to pay overtime to cover those shifts until we get someone through the training program and get them replaced. So negligence can cost a great deal of money for agencies and or cities or counties. In court, lawyers have rules. One of their rules is, if you cannot attack the facts, attack the deliverer of the facts or the method of delivery. And this is from an attorney with the California Highway Patrol, Major Gordon Graham. So how many of you have ever gone to testify in court? because of something that happened in your communication center. Maybe you made a recording of a call, or maybe you were the call taker or the dispatcher involved in an incident that went to court. If they can't argue the facts, whatever you have in their CAD system, whatever you have on the police report, the fire report, the EMS report, if they can't argue against that, they're going to go after you and try to deface you per se, or try to discredit you as a witness. So they may look at your personnel file, and if you've ever been in trouble for any reason or been written up, maybe you didn't have good evaluations, they're going to use that to kind of discredit you in front of the jury. But jurors also have a role. If it's in the report, it probably happened. If it's not in the report, it probably did not happen. And this is something I teach a lot when I teach trainers and supervisors with IPTM. The FBI standard is document, document, document. If it's not documented, it didn't happen. So especially with trainees, especially with veteran employees who we do evaluations for, we do discipline for. That's why you guys have CAD systems. Caller gives us information, we enter it in CAD. Dispatcher sends that to the responders either verbally or via the MDT. So they are getting everything we are getting from the caller. So very, very important. Then there's something called an emergency rule. The courts have been compelled to recognize that a person who is confronted with an emergency is not held to the same standard of conduct normally applied to one who is in no such situation. Well, this emergency rule also works in the event of hurricanes in Florida. When I worked in Florida for 31 years working in Florida, one of the things that happened during a major storm was when the winds get to a certain miles per hour, we stop dispatching apparatus. We stop dispatching responders. We're still taking the calls. They go into our system and we leave them in the queue until we are given the okay to put the units back on the road. Sometimes that could be right away, an hour, maybe it's multiple hours. During Hurricane Irma in Pinellas County, we did not dispatch units for like 24 hours. It was the first time we've ever done that in Pinellas County's history. So one of the things was we were still taking 911 calls. So we're giving CPR instructions, stopping the bleeding, all those kind of things. So it was kind of, excuse me. So it was kind of crazy when all those things happened. Now it's affecting us during this COVID-19 situation. We're asking a lot more questions as a call taker for our responder safety. So we're asking for law enforcement calls, we're asking for fire medical calls, we're asking if people have a cough, if they have a fever, if, you know, all these different things that are coming out. So an emergency rule can kind of change some things. Some of our policies and procedures may be a little more flexible during this time. I know of some places that have even eased up on the dress code just to make things a little more comfortable for the operators. There's something called qualified immunity. So if you believe your actions were correct and you acted accordingly, and if others in the same situation acted differently, but it's still correct, you cannot be successfully sued. So the point of this one is call takers and dispatchers all have different styles, different techniques, but as long as you follow your policy, procedure, protocols, you're protected. And that's one of the big things you can really take away from this presentation is policy, procedure, and protocol. So we used to call them the 3 Ps in Pinellas County. If you follow those, you are protected. Because if I'm a call taker and I take a call with weapons involved, it may be my first or second line of notes. Another call taker may put it their third or fourth line. Does that make them wrong or me right? No, we still answered the same questions. It's just my view of it is units need to skip this as soon as possible. Maybe somebody left the scene of an incident in a vehicle. Well, maybe I personally get the vehicle description first, then the suspect description. Somebody else may get the suspect description and then the vehicle. We're still getting the information. We're acting a little bit differently, but we're still both doing it correctly. Vicarious liability is like liability on steroids. Takes it a little more involved because it means the employer and any agents that work there. So you may be the comm center manager, all of your call takers and dispatchers and trainers and supervisors are all agents, and you are ultimately responsible for everything. So what happens is if someone makes a mistake and someone is injured, everyone in that chain of command could be sued regardless of if they were there when it happened or their actual physical involvement in that incident. So there's 7 different types of liability where it comes to vicarious liability. So we call them the 7 deadly sins. So the first one is negligent appointment. This is when you appoint someone to a position which they're not qualified for. So in other words, if you do critical testing for your applicants and this person did not pass, but you gave them the job anyway, or they didn't pass a polygraph or a psychological evaluation, or it's a friend of a friend of a friend who got hired, they weren't qualified for the job, but we appointed them to that job anyway. So whoever was involved with that process is involved with negligent appointment. Negligent assignment is if we assign someone to a job they're not qualified for. So in training, we have our new trainee learning the call taker position. They're taking administrative calls, they're taking 911 calls, and we decide as the trainer, okay, you know, you're not done training yet, but you're doing a really good job. I'm gonna go get us food at the fast food restaurant. You go ahead and keep taking calls, I'm not here. I'll be back. They're not signed off on that position, so they really shouldn't be doing it without supervision. So that would be negligent assignment. Negligent entrustment is entrusting someone with a piece of equipment or maybe a piece of software that they're not qualified to use. I know when we use NCIC equipment, we don't always get our people certified, but we're allowed to get them certified within 6 months. Well, if I let my trainee use the NCIC system with my login and they're not trained, I'm entrusting them with that. They're not ready for that yet. They haven't been to the class, they haven't passed their certification, those kind of things. Negligent retention, we hear about this one a lot. Negligent retention would be as a trainer, if we decide not to keep this trainee in our program because they're not passing, but someone above us decides, you know, we're really short staffed, we need the body, we're gonna let them pass through the CTO program, even though they failed the test, they're not consistently a 4 or better. Or it could be a veteran employee who is having some sort of issues, either call taking, dispatching, tardiness, abusing sick time, whatever it's gonna be, but we decide to keep them. Maybe they've been written up multiple times, but we keep them anyway because we need a body in the seat. We're keeping somebody who can't do the job. Failure to train affects trainers and supervisors. Some agencies have trainers who are voluntary, so they volunteer to train. Some people are mandatorily told you will train. And if you tell me I'm gonna train, am I gonna give 100%? Well, if I'm assigned to train, I need to give 100%. Failure to supervise, that affects trainers and supervisors. You can't just leave your trainee by themselves. And as a supervisor, you can't just leave your whole shift of people doing what they do while you leave and, you know, go somewhere else and not put someone in charge per se. Failure to direct could be any senior person who's working in the floor, supervisor, trainer, those kind of things. If someone needs assistance, so we have a major incident like a bank robbery, hostage situation, someone needs to give us direction on, okay, I need Sarah, I need you to call detectives. Bob, I need you to call the FBI because this is a bank robbery. Somebody has to be in there to help make sure everything works together efficiently and effectively. So call taker and dispatcher functions, there's basically three. Okay, a lot of people forget about the last one. So we have the call receiving phase, the dispatch phase, and then the post dispatch phase. So call taker during the call receiving time, ask for the pertinent information. Got to have a good address. And this could include cities, could include cross streets, could include unit numbers, suite numbers, building numbers, floors, those kind of things. We have to determine the appropriate nature or code. Is this a police incident, fire incident, medical incident? And what would be that priority? When it comes to priority, is this an in-progress call, a just occurred call, or a delayed or not in progress call? And then determinants are just determined by EMD, EFD, EPD protocols. So you may have an alpha level response, a delta level response, those kind of things. The dispatcher gets the information through the CAD system from the call taker, and their job is to send the appropriate resources, make sure the response level is proper, for example, fire medical. So they're using that determinant as well to figure out how many apparatus to send and what level. And are any notifications needed to be made? Some agencies have state or county parks. If something happens at a county or state park, they need to make a phone call notification or maybe page someone out. So the dispatcher is responsible for those steps. And then post-dispatch is the period between when the call's dispatched and the first unit arrives on scene. Well, sometimes that could be 3 to 5 minutes, could be longer, depending on the type of call, the nature, and all those things. But additional notes are still coming in. The call taker is still on the phone with the caller. They're updating information. The dispatcher can either give that verbally or maybe via the MDT, depending on what your policy says. We're also running criminal justice information system queries. NCIC, we're running tags, driver's licenses. We're doing warrant checks, criminal history checks, those kind of things. And if it's a fluid call where locations are changing, like a DUI driver or rolling domestic, we need to know where the people are now so we can update the responding units appropriately. Ministerial duty is a duty that leaves little or no discretion to the call taker or dispatcher. Basically means we have clear-cut policies. Well, we do have clear-cut policies and procedures for some things, but I really doubt we have a policy and procedure for everything that could ever happen in dispatch. We live in the gray area a great deal, not black and white. And COVID-19 is a prime example. We've had flu seasons, we've had swine flu, we've had anthrax, and we've developed policies, procedures, protocols to go along with that on the fly as we go. And that's what we do best. We work through the situations using a lot of common sense, talking to medical directors, police chiefs, fire chiefs. How do you want us to handle this? Give us some guidance. So if you don't have policy and procedures, we're getting into what we call the Discretionary Act. If there is no hard and fast rule as to what to do, we kind of have to use a lot of common sense. But in dispatch, pretty much everything we do is immediate. We have to act now. So attitude has a lot to do with liability and negligence. So people have a bad attitude, callers get upset. If we have a caring attitude, we show empathy, we use active listening skills, a kind tone of voice, and we're very helpful, we are probably less likely to be sued than those who don't. So good doctors and bad doctors get sued, but nice doctors do not. And something I always thought was entertaining was demeanor the call taker or dispatcher, demeanor the caller. So if a caller calls in, they're upset. They're cursing at us. We could try to talk them down, calm them down, listen, pay attention, those kind of things. And make sure that we have them ready so when the responders get there, things have calmed down. Or we have other call takers or dispatchers that like to fire up the caller, which is not a good thing. So that when the responders get there, now it's a knockdown, drag out fight. And they're really mad at the operator, and now they're going to take it out on the responder. So not such a good thing. Okay, so some ways to limit liability. Number one, we've talked about it over and over again. Make sure your employees follow policies, procedures, and protocols. If they're lacking, or you don't have them, or they're not up to date, you need to work on that. One of the big things is a lot of agencies create really nice policy procedure manuals, and they never go back and update them. So we need to look at them periodically to make sure, well, our CAD system changed, our phone system changed, new statutes have come out, new updates for our protocols have come out. Do our policy and procedures match those new protocols? Don't be afraid to ask for help from your supervisor. That's why they're there. They have a lot of knowledge. They've done the job, they've been there. So if you're not sure what to do, ask for help. Don't be afraid. Don't think you have to do everything on your own. And if a supervisor is not available, there are senior people in the room, and there are a lot of people who are mentors to some of our newer or younger employees. You can always ask a mentor, what should you do? Documentation is huge. We have a CAD system. We need to document everything within reason, because it could come back and bite us if we document something that should have been documented. Of course, on our call taking and our dispatching positions, we have recorders. So we can always get the information from the recorder as well if we have to play back something to get information that was missed. Provide excellent customer service. You've always heard the stories about, somebody went to a restaurant, they had great customer service. They will tell 10, 15, 20 other people. Same thing happens if someone has a bad experience with customer service. We can't offer them a free meal or a coupon or, replace their food and give them an ice cream or whatever. We can't do that in 911. Okay, we only have one shot of giving them really good customer service. So it's really important. When in doubt, send them out. That's one of the basis for the EMD, EFD, and EPD protocols from the International Academy of Emergency Dispatch. If you're not sure if you should send help, send help. They can sort it out in the end. At least put a call in your CAD system. It can be overridden by a supervisor or something along those lines, or maybe some agencies have the ability to have an officer or deputy call the person and take a report. That's okay too. But at least trying to do the right thing. And that's the final one, is do the right thing. You guys have done this for a long time. You're very good at what you do. And if we're training our new employees to do the right thing as well, that's going to be awesome. So for trainers and supervisors, they are generally not liable unless they do one of these three things. The first one is they ordered the action. If they ordered the trainee or the employee to do something that's illegal, that violates policy or procedure, if they order it, they become liable, not the employee. If they participated in the action, for example, gossip. We're not supposed to gossip at our agency, but the trainers and supervisors were gossiping just like the other employees. They become liable because they have more responsibility. And the last thing is they ratified or condoned the action. They saw something was going wrong and they did nothing about it. They swept it under the rug. They pretended like they had an ostrich, head in the sand kind of situation. They did nothing about it. Okay, so when should you intervene? So this could be for call takers, dispatchers, trainees, employees who have been there 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, to keep your agency out of trouble. First thing is, if it's illegal, we need to jump in. We don't need our employees doing anything illegal. Our job is to enforce the law with police, fire, and medical. If something's immoral, we should jump in as well. If the situation is deteriorating, we should jump in. The call taker is freezing up per se, or they're on the radio, units are setting up a perimeter. The dispatcher has no idea where these units are at. You may need to jump in. If it's an officer or responder safety issue, we're not asking about weapons, where the suspect is located, if there's alcohol or drugs involved, we may need to jump in. Something happens that is embarrassing to the agency and can, if the media gets a hold of it, that could be very bad. And again, if it's against policy, procedure, or protocol, that's usually when we need to jump in and correct them. Because if we fail to correct a mistake, the mistake's going to become a habit and they will do it wrong all the time. And then a lot of times trainees or employees will freeze, especially trainees when they're new, because they've never had this type of job before. The trainer needs to jump in. Again, it's nothing personal. We just need to help them get through it. Maybe we need to give them directions on what question to ask next, those kind of things. So let me tell you a quick story about something that happened at Largo PD when I was there. We had a situation where we had a parental kidnapping that happened in Largo. So we went out, took the report, and we had gotten information that the father had taken the son and were heading to the east coast of Florida. So we did our due diligence and we sent BOLOs out from Pinellas County all the way through every county that you could get to, all the way to where they were supposedly going. So it ended up that a couple days later, there was a pursuit with the vehicle in question, and the father ran into an underpass of a bridge, had a collision, and killed both the husband and the child. So understandably, bad situation happened. It ended up that the mother sued the Largo Police Department. Now, we were nowhere near the scene, okay? Like I talked about, you don't even have to be involved. Well, they filed the lawsuit saying that we didn't notify all the jurisdictions. Well, the good part is NCIC in Florida, which is called FCIC, they keep records of all the teletypes that we sent. So we showed that we sent teletypes all the way across the state like we were supposed to. So we ended up getting unnamed from the lawsuit. But sometimes bad things happen and you can get named in a lawsuit, but it doesn't mean you're going to jail. It doesn't mean you did anything wrong. Sometimes we have to look and find out what happened in the situation to determine, okay, what worked, what didn't work. Maybe we can make our policies better. So sometimes it's a learning experience. Sometimes if we really do something wrong and we violated policy, or we decided not to put in a call, we could be personally in trouble for not doing something. Maybe we lose our job, we get fired. Maybe it could be criminal. Maybe it could be civil. Those kind of things can happen. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Sarah and see if there's any questions in the Q&A session.
Thank you so much, Mark. I really enjoyed listening to all of this, and I was rereading your bio while you were talking, and I'm just blown away by how much experience you're bringing to the table. So thank you very much for sharing all of this. I'm opening the floor now if anybody has any questions. There's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and I'll give you all a moment to write in some questions if you have any.
Well, while we're waiting for some questions, I want to thank you for attending. Hopefully it gave you some good information, maybe just a refresher to go back and look over some of your policies, making sure they're up to date, making sure we're doing the right things for the citizens, especially now, this pandemic that's going around. But my email and my phone number is up there, so if you have any questions or want to chat, feel free to reach out to me.
Fantastic. I'm not seeing any questions coming through. So if it's okay with you, Mark, I think I'm going to go ahead and close the session. And I want to thank everybody for joining us and invite you to please join us for our next session and the last one for today. This is options and functionality contained within a NextGen 911 logging recorder, and it will be presented by Ryan Hurley, who's the Vice President of Replay Systems Incorporated. And don't miss tomorrow's sessions either. We'll be beginning with Lorene Anderson. She's the 911 manager for Charlotte County, Florida's Sheriff's Office, and she'll be speaking about health and wellness efforts in 911. So thank you all very much for joining us today. Have a great rest of your afternoon and evening. Bye-bye.